Okay, so our speakers today are Heather Sherman, who is the Director of Library Operations at BDS, and Jenny May, who's the Metadata Services Coordinator at Imperial College London. And they're going to talk to us about the academic library license. So I'll hand over to you two.
Get the sharing going. Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to talk to you all about the academic library licence. I'm going to start a bit with a background to just who BDS is and how the academic library licence works. And then I'll hand over to Jenny May, who's going to talk to you in more detail about how Imperial College have made use of it. So starting with who BDS are, for those of you who aren't so familiar with us, we are Bibliographic Data Services. We were established in 1995 and we are a privately owned company. We are owned by our original co-founders, Leslie White and Eric Green, who both have a history in library supply. We have around 60 employees that work for us, and we're up in Dumfries in the southwest of Scotland. And we are really proud that we are a real living wage employer. That's very important to the business. And we've been providing academic libraries with records for over 25 years, and we also supply the British Library with their CIP records, and we've done that for 25 years as well. Now, this is where we're based. I thought you might like to see where we actually live. So this is our campus. It's called Crichton. We have offices just over here and in the building here, but it's a really nice place to work. As you can see from that, it's surrounded by countryside. It's a beautiful place to be based. So there were a number of factors that led us to look at developing the academic library licence, and I'll talk a bit more about each one of these in a little bit more detail. So one of the first ones was the report that Emma Booth did for NAG on the quality shelf-ready metadata, finding that around a quarter of libraries were dissatisfied with the quality of records from suppliers. And those libraries were doing quite a lot of quality control and also correcting errors. They weren't really getting the service that they were paying for. We also spoke to one library who had done some analysis of their help desk inquiries, and they had found that around 15% could be attributed directly to poor metadata. And obviously that's making the user's experience worse than it could be. It's preventing users from finding resources, and it's also potentially meaning that resources are being underutilised. The next report that we looked at was the report that Jisc commissioned on remodeling the UK data marketplace. Again, finding very similar themes to the ones that Emma's report found for NAG, with libraries spending considerable amounts of money acquiring metadata. Often it wasn't fit for purpose. Again, libraries spending time correcting records that they had purchased. And the data was flowing through lots of different channels. It wasn't a very clean system at all. The landscape is very messy, with data flowing from player to player and often being stripped of intellectual content while it goes through that journey. And that's something that we're certainly aware of at BDS. We know that the records that leave us don't always arrive at the library as in the state that they left us. They do lose elements across their journey. The other report, it's more of a strategy document actually, that we've also been looking at is the RLUK Strategy for 2022 to 25. Again, pulling on those themes of promoting efficient data flows for discovery of resources and working to enhance the metadata, streamlining the process for metadata and improving discovery. So lots of very similar themes coming from a variety of different sources. And the Jisc Plan M aims, which I'm sure most of you are very familiar with, also gave us a very good set of objectives to work towards, and we've borne those in mind whilst we've been developing the academic library licence, because we felt that they gave a very good set of guidelines for us to work to, and we've worked really hard to make sure that we are meeting all of those. So in terms of what the academic library licence is, it is a completely new service. We developed it in close consultation with stock suppliers, system suppliers, publishers and the SUPC. We wanted to make sure that we were bringing in all the different players into the system so that they could have an input into what we were developing. It's been designed to meet the specific requirements and buying patterns of UK and Irish academic libraries, whilst we were in the very early design phase, the stock suppliers very kindly shared with us a year's worth of sales data, so we could see what was being sold into academic libraries, and that gave us a list of publishers to work with, and also gave us some parameters around dates and languages, which was really helpful. It's been designed so that there's no need to dedicate staff time to sourcing, creating or quality checking records, with the aim of freeing up expert staff. We always, when we're talking to libraries, we know that there's lots of other initiatives that libraries have that really could use those expert skills apart from creating records, and there are things that libraries do which can't be outsourced so easily. So things like DEI initiatives, which is obviously very important at the moment, working on special collections to make those visible outside of the library, getting involved with research data management and reading lists. So there's always extra work that those skilled staff can be involved in. And the other benefit of using the academic library license is that it will support direct delivery to campus, which I know Jenny's going to touch on in her section. So it's a Jisc banded annual subscription, and that covers the creation, curation, supply and sharing of metadata. The records that are supplied under the academic library license can be used for normal library purposes, for adding your library holdings to a union catalogue such as WorldCat. You can make the records available to other libraries via Z3950 or API. And it also permits the sharing of reuse of records, so they can be contributed to, for example, the Alma Community Zone, OCLC WorldCat for your holdings, but also to Jisc MBK Compare and Discover. In terms of coverage, it covers records for new orders, so new additions to stock for English language print, ebook and open access titles published after the 1st of January 2010. And that's published anywhere in the world, not just in the UK. What matters is that the title is in English. And if we also have an older title, or we do have a good record for a non-English language title, then we would supply those as well. You also get access to our database of book in hand and CIP records, and those can be used for upgrading existing holdings or for donations or for improving the quality of unpurchased PDA and EBA titles, for example. So you have that access as well to improve those records that you maybe in the past haven't been able to catalogue to the standard that you would want to. When we were designing the ALL, as I said, we worked really deep in very close collaboration with other bodies. So we worked with the SUPC and NAG, and particularly around the quality of the records that we were going to provide. We wanted to make sure that when libraries were using the academic library license, they would be very clear about what would be in those records. So we created very detailed specifications that go right down to tag and subfield level. So the records meet the SUPC essential when applicable metadata requirements. They also meet the ebook records also meet the NISO recommended metadata practice. And the way we create the records is that the publishers have given us access to frontlist and backlist print, ebook and open access titles. We've built our own digital repository to hold those in, and we've got over 730,000 titles in that now. All of the records are created by expert cataloguers, and we just hold a single title per record, a single record per title. We also have a dedicated help desk, so regardless of where you've sourced the material from, there's a single point of call for any questions you might have about the metadata that's being provided. As you would expect, the records adhere to all current agreed international cataloguing classification standards, so they are RDA compliant. We can supply in UTF-8 or Mark 8. We do NATO authority control for contributors. We can supply DEWI, Library of Congress, or classifications. And at the moment, we're using Library of Congress and mesh subject headings. Because we're supplying to public libraries and also into the book trade more generally, we also have BIC and thema headings, and we have our own genre headings for fiction, which we can supply if libraries find those useful. Just touch briefly on linked data. So I think most libraries at the moment in the world will be holding their records in standard Mark 21 format without any linked data elements in there. And in order to be able to insert those linked data elements into existing records, you'll need to have high quality records that have consistent and correct marking coding, and it's a lot easier if you have extensive use of control vocabularies and standard authorities, which is exactly what the BDS records will have. We are starting to include ISNIs in our records, and we are also going to be moving to fast subject headings later on this year. The other area we're looking at with linked data is services that will make the transition easier for libraries. So we were looking at options for adding ISNIs retrospectively. We've already done that internally. We've worked with the British Library, who provided us with a correspondence file that linked authorities to ISNIs, and that enabled us to then match up on those authorities in our records and insert the ISNIs into our records. So we've already done that exercise at scale, so we know we can do it. And we're also planning crosswalk services between ISNIs and other identifiers, such as NACE identifiers or ORCIDs. And finally, on linked data, BDS is an ISNI registration agency. We're the only one in the UK apart from the legal deposit libraries. So that means that we can assign ISNIs when we're creating records. So this is a sort of behind the scenes look at what goes on in terms of record creation. So we start off with what we call our trade records. So those are created from feeds from publishers. We've got around over 15,000 feeds coming in from the different publishers, and those tend to be in Onyx. We have an automated process that maps Onyx to MARC and also adds theme or subject headings at that stage. The next stage that we move to is to create a CIP record. So we take the trade record, and into that we're adding things like Dewey Decimal classification, Congress classifications, subject headings, those authorities, and we're standardizing the record. So those are our sort of middle quality records, if you like, and then our best quality records, which we call confirmed on this screen, are the highest quality records that we have, and that's where we're working directly from the book in hand to create the record. So we are transcribing from the book in hand, we're reviewing the subjects once we can see the full text of the book, and we're also just doing a general check of the record to make sure that it's completely accurate. So this is just what it looks like for our cataloguers. So when we're working from upgrading from a trade record to the CIP records, you can see the cataloguers here got a list of titles to work from. On the screen, they get a little clipboard icon. If they click on that, that brings up this advanced information sheet. So that's come from the publishers telling us information in advance of publication about the title. It's very accurate. And we use that to create the CIP records that we do for the British Library and for other users as well. The next stage is then to increase the quality of that CIP record into a confirmed record. So this is where we're now working from the title in hand that's coming from our digital repository. And you can see here an example again of what that looks like to our cataloguers. So they can call this up on a screen, and then they can use that to create the record from. On top of that internal process for upgrading records, we then have the process that is used by the Academic Library License process. So this is the system that's being used for libraries to request records from us. So it starts with the library sending us a spreadsheet of orders and possibly invoices as well. From that, we do a match on the existing records. Where we've got a record already in our system with the right quality, then that's sent straight back. If we need to work on the records further to improve the quality, then these are catalogued as we call them misses on our system. And those are the records that are going to our cataloguing teams to work from. And then we would aim to have those records back to the library within 2 working days. Again, this is what it looks like behind the scenes. So you can see we've got the spreadsheets here coming in from the libraries. Our system then works on those spreadsheets. It extracts the ISBNs and some other identifiers. Where we've got the existing records, they're sent straight back. Where we need to work on the records, what we were calling the misses, the cataloguers get a spreadsheet to work from again. So you can see this is a list of all the titles that were in a particular set of orders. The green lines were where we had an existing record, so that was supplied straight away. The yellow lines are the ones we need to work on to upgrade, so that's being done by the cataloguers, and then those records will be going out to the library. All of our Academic Library License users are using an automated workflow to request the records. they were all very keen to sign up to the ALL because they could see the benefit in having that process that just sits behind the scenes and runs once it's been set up. So the automated workflow is vendor and format neutral. It covers the request and delivery of those high quality records for orders and invoices. Once the initial setup has been done, there shouldn't need to be any further staff intervention. It just sits behind the scenes and runs every day, requesting and importing records. And it works with or without shelf ready. You can see on the screen here the systems that we've got it set up for so far. So we have, it works with Xlibris, with Alma, or with Rialto. You don't need to have both of those modules. You can have just Alma on its own. We've also got it in place with Koha, and we have integration with Cersei Dynix and ESS systems as well. If we just look at the Alma workflow, because that's the one that I know most of the, well, roughly half of the libraries, university libraries in the UK have Alma, so we'll look at that as an example. So it starts by the library creating a purchase order that's sent to the supplier. The automated process then steps in, and there are reports that are run within Alma that extract details of the orders placed within the previous 24 hours and also invoices raised. So those are put into a spreadsheet by the analytics package on Alma, which automatically sends those across to our systems. Our system then extracts the ISBNs and the other information it needs from those reports, sends back the records that we already have in our system, and flags those that need improving. And the ones that need improving then get sent to our cataloguing team for that work to be done. And then once those files of records are ready, there's an import profile on Alma, again, that's watching out for those files of records being deposited on our FTP server. When it sees those, it's finding them and it's automatically pulling them through. We get a unique ID as part of the data that gets sent at the start of the process, and we send that unique ID back so that there's a direct match between the order record and the incoming record from BDS. There's also there's various notifications that come out from the system as well, so that the libraries are kept informed of the progress and of anything that's out of scope. So out of scope titles would be anything non-English for which we don't already have a record, or anything published pre-2010 for which we don't already have a record. Also, just wanted to touch very briefly on sustainability, because I know that this is something that's very important to a number of libraries. And if you're looking for ways to reduce your carbon footprint, then the Academic Library Licence will help you do that. We're centralising cataloguing activities rather than dispersing them across lots of institutions. So the process is more streamlined. We're creating that record once and then allowing you to reuse that record, so you wouldn't have to create another record. If you're a library that's got a record already, then you can share that. We're working, as I said, from the digital surrogates, so there's no physical books going up and down the country as used to be the case. And none of that would matter if we weren't benchmarked to prove that we were being efficient at what we do, and we have been. And in every case where we were compared to 3 other institutions doing similar kind of work, we were found to be significantly more productive. So I will now hand over to Jenny so that she can carry on with her part of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Ella. I'll just share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So yeah, my name is Jenny May and I'm the Metadata Services Coordinator at Imperial College London. So I'm quickly going to go over what I'm going to cover. So I'm going to start with a bit of background information about the library to give a bit of context, and then go on to explain the reasons why we've decided to become an early adopter of the academic license. So I'm going to talk about how we've implemented the academic library license in our acquisitions workflows, focusing on how we're using it instead of shelf-ready MARC records from our main supplier, which is ProQuest. And I'll talk about how this works with our library management system, which is Xlibris Alma. And we use the Rialto marketplace, which is integrated in Alma, as well as ordering on supplier platforms. So we started using the license in August last year. And for the first year, we've been focusing on making sure that our main acquisitions workflow for print and title by title ebook purchases is working seamlessly. And now that we're in our second year of using the license, we're looking at where else we can use BDS records that we get as part of the license. So I'll talk a bit about what we're working towards with BDS at the moment. So to start with, just a bit about Imperial. Imperial College awards only degrees in STEM subjects, so that's science, technology, engineering and medicine. And there's also a business school. The Centre for Languages, Culture and Communication teaches humanities courses and offers the Imperial Horizons programme to give undergraduates a chance to take modules in these subjects as part of their science degree. So this means that we do buy some resources to support the humanities, but we're mainly buying for STEM subjects. So the main campus is in South Kensington, which is where the central library is, and that's where the acquisitions and metadata team is based. As the metadata coordinator, I'm looking after the metadata side of the team. And we have 3 acquisitions and metadata coordinators who do some metadata work as part of their role. So you can see on the map here that there are 9 campuses, not all of them visible. You can see that there are some that are off the map. So out of those 9 campuses, 7 have libraries. So there's a central library and then there are 6 other libraries. So we've got 5 medical libraries at various teaching hospitals in London. And we also have a library at our Silwood Park campus, which is a rural campus in Berkshire, and that teaches life sciences. So these other libraries, they're much smaller than our central library. And we've only got a few members of staff working at each one. So the acquisitions and metadata team, we don't travel out to those other libraries. I've only ever been to one of them, which was Silwood the other week. So this means that we communicate mostly by email and we haven't actually ever met each other in person in most cases. So this presents a bit of a challenge for us in terms of acquisitions workflows and managing metadata across all those sites. So just to cover a few changes for us over the past few years during the pandemic. So the first big change was that the acquisitions and metadata team continued hybrid working after the pandemic, and actually most of the staff at Central Library are still hybrid working to some degree. So within our team, we're on campus 2 days a week now, and we spread out our on-campus days so that Monday to Friday is covered, and everyone in the team gets to see everyone else at least once a month. So that works well, but it's only really possible because the nature of our work's changed. So the acquisitions and metadata officers I mentioned before, 2 of them used to be just metadata officers. So they're doing a lot less cataloguing work, partly because of the license, but partly because of the other changes that I'll move on to now. So the next change was that during the pandemic, we asked our print suppliers to send orders directly to our campus libraries. So we used to have all deliveries sent to the central library first, and then our team would handle all of the receiving, processing and cataloguing before then sending the books onto the libraries where they belong. But during the pandemic, the acquisitions team was rarely on site, whereas the campus libraries started to open, and those staff on site were able to receive the books for us, and we sent them instructions on how to do this. So sending the books directly to campuses is a much more streamlined and efficient way of doing things. And actually, we were thinking of doing it before the pandemic. So we've kept doing it, and it means that our team has much less on-site work to do, which is another reason why we can work from home more. And lastly, we're buying a lot more electronic resources now rather than print. So the number of our electronic resources was increasing anyway. But we stopped buying print during the pandemic, and now we're much more focused on buying and managing electronic resources, and print usage hasn't reached pre-pandemic levels. And we're not quite sure why this is. I think other libraries are seeing a return to the print usage, but not us, and it's reflected in what we buy. So we have a digital first policy, So we only buy print in certain circumstances. So for course titles on reading lists, where the user or librarian has requested print, or for titles that we can't buy as ebooks. So this brings me on to why we decided to use the BDS Academic Libraries license. So we used to pay for shelf-ready records for our print books from ProQuest, who, as I said, is our main supplier. We'd also get the free shelf-ready records for our ProQuest ebooks, and we'd also get free shelf-ready records from Browns, who is our secondary print supplier. The records we got were mostly of pretty good quality. We had a few issues with the free ebook records, which were not quite as consistent. And we also felt that if we did have issues with records, our concerns were not always understood by the supplier because we weren't speaking to the cataloguers that created the records, which could sometimes be a bit frustrating. So the quality of shelf-ready records is something that has been an issue for some time, and Heather mentioned a NAG report from a few years back that looked into this. And we feel that the BDS license is a good alternative to supply metadata. Getting records from BDS instead means that we've got a single supply of records for all our new orders, regardless of the vendor. Our thinking was that we prefer to go straight to the source of the records by using the BDS license, so that we know that the records will be standardized. And if we've got any issues, then we're going to be talking directly to the cataloging agency that created those records and knows what we're talking about. So basically with Shelf Ready, you're just outsourcing that cataloging work entirely, and we want to be able to rely on the records that we get and do the bare minimum quality control. And this is really important to us now, given that we don't even see half the books that we order because we have this decentralized process where books are going out directly to other libraries, and because we're not on site as much to look at the books that are going to the central library. So there's much less manual intervention in our workflows now. We used to quickly check every record that came in, and we don't do this anymore. So we need a solution that fits in with our existing shelf-ready workflows, and BDS are working with our suppliers and Ex Libris, so we felt that it was a good option for our library. So I'll move on to the implementation of the license and how it works with our acquisitions workflow. So this is pretty standard, at least for Alma users, but it's just to clarify what our shelf-ready metadata process used to look like when we got records direct from ProQuest or Browns. So we'd order books either within Alma using the Rialto marketplace or using the vendor platform. At the point of order, when the order is created, it's attached to a skeleton bibliographic record that's generated automatically in our system, along with an empty holding record if it's print or empty portfolio if it's an ebook. And then when the book was dispatched or activated, we'd be sent the mark record from the vendor, and that would have the holding information in, so the barcode, class mark, and so on, in the 852 field. Or if it was an ebook, it would have the URL in the 856 field. So the problem in the beginning for us was how do we fit BDS into that existing workflow, because we still need the holdings information and the URLs from the supplier. BDS can't put that in the mark records because they're not supplying that information, they're just giving us the bibliographic record. So for ProQuest, this wasn't an issue because BDS had already set up a workflow with ProQuest. So ProQuest send ISBNs of our orders to BDS, and then BDS send catalogue records to ProQuest, and then ProQuest send us the BDS records with our holdings information added. But the BDS license covers all our suppliers, so we needed a solution that worked for all orders. So we needed to make sure that whatever record our supplier was sending us wasn't going to overlay on the BDS record that we wanted to use in our catalogue. So the timing of when we were getting the BDS records was an issue. So basically, the BDS record needs to be either the final record that comes in, or we had to prevent the vendor record from overlaying. So this is the new workflow. So we send BDS a daily report of all orders. The report is generated automatically by our library management system. So this is an Alma analytics report, and it contains details of all orders placed in the previous day. It includes the MMS IDs, so the unique record identifier in the 001 field. So BDS include this later in the record they send us, so we can make sure that we match the records exactly. So BDS send us records within 2 days. They return any records that they have in their system immediately, which we import via FTP. Any records that are in scope but need to be catalogued by BDS, they'll come back to us in 2 days. So all records come back to us within 2 days. Usually we'll get the BDS record first before the vendor record. The only exception are some ebooks that are activated very quickly. So when the vendor record comes in with this holdings information or the URL at the point when the book arrives, we don't want the vendor record to overlay onto our BDS record. So what we do is we send BDS another report from our LMS, and this is of all items that are invoiced. And so then they send out another record, and this is imported just after the vendor record. So we end up with the BDS record as the final record. This does mean that we're importing the same record twice, but it doesn't really make any difference. We don't really need to import the records the first time at the point of order, but we thought it was better to have this full discoverability at an earlier point in our systems, just for various reasons, like having the full metadata for citations on reading lists, things like that. So we import the records before we have the stock available. So another challenge with implementation was how to deal with items that aren't covered by the license. So the license covers English language publications after 2010, where BDS are able to get a digital copy. So our previous shelf-ready vendors would send us records for everything that we order. So there was an issue there at first. So how do we know when we've ordered something that isn't covered by the license? And also, what do we do with it, given that we want this very hands-off workflow? So BDS alerts us when we've ordered something that's either out of scope or catalogued in publication. We get these alerts by email, and they go to our team mailbox. So then we can go through those out of scope titles remotely. We worked out that roughly 10 to 15% of all orders are out of scope, mostly because they're older than 2010. So of those 10 to 15% of titles that we're alerted to, and that's roughly about 5 titles per day at busy times of the year, some of them are orders for additional copies, so we don't need to worry about getting new records in for those. And most of them we can find good records from free external resources like the MBK or the Library of Congress. So that checking and copy cataloguing we can do from home, but there's a small number of stuff that we just can't find records for, the weird and wonderful stuff. So I would think that's only about 1% of all orders. So in those cases, we will put a work order on the book. So this is an alert in Alma. So when the book is received, the person receiving the book will know that they need to pass it on to someone who can catalogue the book. If that happens at one of our campus libraries, the staff there will scan the covers and the title page, and then they'll send it to us so we can catalogue it remotely. And lastly, other ways that we're using the license. So we have access to the BDZ database, which is the database of BDS records. So we use that for copy cataloguing, things like donations, which has been really useful. We used to have access to OCLC records, but we decided not to subscribe after our costs increased quite significantly due to the national agreement with Jisc. So having access to the BDZ database has really helped to fill the gap that OCLC left. We're also starting a project to reclassify stock from UDC to GUI. So we used to use UDC up until about 12 years ago, when we started classifying all new stock to GUI, but we didn't reclassify our existing stock. I think we just hoped it would gradually disappear through reading. But 12 years later, we still have a lot of UDC stock, so we're starting to reclassify that. and BDZ database has been quite useful to find those Dewey numbers. We're also working on a workflow for Overdrive records. So we buy ebooks and audiobooks from Overdrive, and we've asked BDS if they can provide records with the linking information included for us. So this is outside of our usual workflow. ISBNs would not be sent to BDS from our daily orders report. Instead, BDS are working directly with Overdrive to get the details of our orders. And lastly, ebook packages. So we're currently investigating a way in which BDS can provide records for ebook packages. As an Alma user, we manage many of our collections using the Alma community zone, which is of varying quality. So we'd like a way to overlay existing poor quality records and also get new records for ebook packages in with the URL included in that record. So I hope that's been useful. We decided to use a license because we felt it was a waste of time to deal with routine metadata, and we wanted to work towards a permanent solution that means we can rely on metadata that we get and have it sort of just take care of itself in the background. And I think that the BDS license is a logical way forward with that. And the developments that we're working on with BDS at the moment are really positive. And it's great that we can help to shape the service into something that suits our requirements. So thanks for listening. And I'm happy to answer any questions and interested to hear any suggestions or comments you might have. So my email's there if you want to get in touch, please do.